Ahlan and salam alaikum, and welcome to this session at the ACT Annual Conference and International Treasury Week 2021. My name is Chris van Dale, and I will be your host for this session. Now, as part of this four-day event, we are looking at various global regions to get an insight into the Treasury specifics and Treasury and challenges within that region from Treasury professionals with local knowledge and experience. And as the title it says, the changing Treasury in the Middle East, we will be looking at the challenges and opportunities within the Middle East region. Now, before we kick off, I just want to highlight that this is a pre-recorded session. So unfortunately, we cannot take any of your questions, but the panelists will be around over the four-day conference to take your questions. So if you have a question, please look for them on the portal and send them a question privately. Now, we have a very exciting panel for us today. We have Muhsin Al-Rostam, who's the Chief Financial Officer at Asyad and previous General Manager Treasury at the Oman Shipping Company. And we have Stani Puloliko, Regional Treasurer Commercial at General Electric. Gentlemen, thank you very much for spending the time and be available for this session. To start off, can I start with Stani? Could you please talk a little bit about your background and how you started working in the corporate treasury world?
Perfect. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for the ACT team for having me on this session. So I was historically a banker. I never knew there was a career option available as a corporate treasurer. Somewhere in 2007, while being a banker, I dealt with this company called GE as a part of an RFP exercise. And this whole process of how structured a treasury organization was intrigued me. I thought it would be a fantastic idea to go on that side of the world with the intention of getting back to banking to be able to sell better. And it's been 15 years since. Loving what I do as a treasury professional. Never say never, but it's exciting times and great to be a part of the treasury community as a whole.
Fantastic, thank you for that. Muhsin, first of all, welcome. Could you give a little bit of your background?
Sure. Thanks, Chris, and thank you, the ACT, for the opportunity. I think I'm not very far from where Stani is as well. So I also started as a banker. Although as a qualification, I'm an accountant. I started as a banker and then moved into the corporate world within the accounting and finance profession back when I was in London and in Dubai with DP World. And then I moved and got introduced to Treasury. Of course, I never looked back after that, and it was all Treasury since the last 12 years. Recently, I took up the role of the CFO of Asyad Group, which is a Middle East logistic integrated provider within the region and within Oman as well, that has the ports, free zones, as well as the largest company within its portfolio, Oman Shipping Company. One of the exciting responsibilities I have now with the new role is the centralization of Treasury. And I've inherited the same team I had with Oman Shipping, and this team will form the centralized Treasury team within the Asyad Group as well, which will be reporting to me as well. And again, very excited to be a part of the discussion today.
Fantastic. Sounds like a very exciting future you have, Muhsin, and loads of exciting challenges ahead. So that's good. And of course, good to hear that we have bankers that move into corporate treasury. And I know that once you get hooked onto corporate treasury, it's very difficult to leave. It's like honey. We all know that. And therefore, we're here at the ACT Annual Conference and International Treasury Week. Now, we talked about you were bankers and then you went into corporate treasury. I've been in the region for about 11 years, and the treasury profession has grown significantly in the region. How do you see the corporate treasury profession in the Middle East? Of course, there's loads of expats here as well, which is very typical for the Middle East. How has that change been within corporate treasury? Muhsin, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, definitely, Chris. So I think one of the fortunate scenarios we have in the Middle East as well is the abundance of the talent as well. We have a lot of expat and local community as well. We have few of the largest banks, not just in the region but globally as well. The expansion within the region in terms of the oil reserve and the development that has led to the expansion in various aspects of life in the region has very much helped the banking landscape as well to develop and improve as well with all these developments. So I would say we're in a very good position when it comes to the talent acquisition of Treasury specifically in terms of the corporate treasury. Of course, the ACT, and I was there, back in the UAE with DP World when ACT first ventured into the region and had the ACT conferences within the region as well. So definitely ACT played a very strong role as well, advocating the role and the importance of having a treasury as a strategic function and as a seat on the table for the management and for the decision making. If you compare it now with where it was, I would say it's very much developed the way it's seen now by senior professionals within the organization. And going forward, of course, with the situation we have now, with the working from home and the COVID as well, it also accelerated the development in Treasury. We used to say a few years back, cash is king. That's when we turned first to Treasury and the liquidity and funding management. Now we say data is king. And it's more of having reliable data for forecasting, for being able to make decisions as well. And I think this is a transformational journey we have today with all the systems we have and the technological advancement when it comes to centralization of the functions and being able to create your own internal banking facilities within the organization itself, and go out to the banking world with very specific and specialized needs. And this is something that I can see our banks need to cope with as well. And this is a challenge that they need to be resilient to going forward.
Fantastic. Very interesting thought. And especially you see that treasury profession has grown significantly in the region. And because of that, the demands of the corporates have changed as well. They become more advanced, which is very interesting to hear. Stani, you have any insights on this?
No, absolutely, Chris. I totally echo with what Mohsin mentioned. One of the fundamental points here is, and this has been a transformational journey which has happened, in the last 5 to 6 years, pretty rapidly compared to the previous 5 to 6 years. What I saw earlier, as a banker and also as a treasury professional outside of the region, was this region largely, thought of treasury being a role which manages AP. That was an inherent view of the treasury profession at one point of time. Like what Mohsin mentioned, like the likes of ACT, the likes of expats coming into the region who wore treasury hats outside the region, that sort of changed, and proliferation of expats into local corporates took that one notch higher. So the question, like you said, has two parts to it, right? One is, how do you see that in the region now? Today, I think in the region, clearly, like, a key example is Mohsin, right? The corporate treasurer is in a key succession planning sort of a role for the CFO. I see that across multiple corporates. A live example like Mohsin being here, it's a common phenomena. Corporate treasurers filling in that role and growing up to that. That's one. Second is, the corporate treasurer role in the region now also has a seat at the table. I see corporate treasurers being a part of strategic discussions around company growth, not just restricted to cash and liquidity, but towards how that liquidity needs to be spent. So this is, clearly a change. The transformation of treasury in the region has been drastic. Expats have played a phenomenal role in two key aspects in my mind. One is the expats have helped represent the region at a very different light within companies, especially MNCs. There used to be a perspective about the region, sand, desert, oil-based. I think there is a lot more in the region, and there is a lot more the region has to offer globally. That light, a lot of expats brought very well within their organizations. That's one critical element. The second element also, which the expats brought in, is nurturing talent. It doesn't stop with just bringing in expats, but also nurturing local talent across the region. I see that to be also a phenomenal strength of bringing expats into the region.
Fantastic, very interesting. So we talked about the corporate treasury and how the corporate has changed. Stanley, staying with you for a little bit, how would you describe the banking landscape in the region, and has the banking landscape changed sufficiently to provide the demands of the regional treasurer or the corporate treasurer in the Middle East?
It's a fantastic question, Chris. The way I see banking here in the region is you've got obviously the international banks, and then you've got the regional local banks, and then you've got the local banks, right? I've seen each of these three buckets develop into a far better versions of themselves over a period of time. The international banks have gone to the other end of the spectrum and tried to become much more local. The regional local bank has also now worn the hat of an international bank, and the local banks have tried to become much more international, right? So I would, the blend is just amazing to see. In other regions, you would not find local banks, trying to be much more international in the space of technology. But that's very different in this region. In this part of the world, local banks have stood shoulder to shoulder with international banks on investment towards technology. And the growth they've demonstrated due to that has been absolutely great. I don't see a need for consolidation, or let me say further consolidation in the region in that banking space. There are still too many banks in the sphere. And I think, coming together and building scale is just going to help corporates better. That's my take.
Absolutely. And then these banks become stronger as well, and can invest more into technology, which we have seen already in the region. So there's some consolidation has already been going, especially since the global financial crisis 2008. We've seen a lot more consolidation, but as you said, there's a lot more room for more. Mohsin, you of course work for a government-based organization, an Omani organization, which makes that your banking policies and demands are a little bit more different, because being a government organization, you probably, you can confirm this, have a much more focused on actually working with the local banks in Oman. How do you as well manage this balance between domestic Omani banks and global regional banks?
Yeah, definitely. So I actually agree with Stani as well on how the development of the local banks as well, and now being in very key services they provide as well. They are standing shoulder to shoulder, and especially when it comes to technology, with the international or with the bigger regional banks as well. For us, of course, as a government company, we always have of course, a system of having a request for proposal or a procurement process, be it a banking service or any other procurement service. So it's very transparent, and it has to be done, on a transparent basis and arm's length basis to whichever organization we deal with. When it comes to the banking platform we deal with, we have a wide range of companies within Asyad as well. So we have the companies which are very much locally centric, and then we have the companies which are very much international. For example, Oman Shipping Company being a global company, having its ships being operated all around the world as well. And that really gives us the platform to be able to navigate between, diversify our banking platform, be it international banks, local banks, and regional banks as well. One of the, of course, key challenges we have it's the credit rating of Oman as well. Although we're a very profitable company, very successful, and you've seen how logistics and shipping in general did back in last year with all the bottlenecks and with the oil prices as well. So we were one of the very fortunate companies, but unfortunately we're still subject to credit rating, which could not surpass the sovereign credit rating. And that could actually limit your access to the international bank. But on the other hand, that actually opened for you the door to go more regionally and more local banks as well. And as Danny mentioned, now with these banks coming shoulder to shoulder, we can see with the government and the central banks stimulus packages as well. Cost of funding for local banks now, I would say, has significantly reduced as well. So that's a positive move as well when it comes to the funding and also to the IT infrastructure they have and the digital aspect of their offerings. For us, we do look at both the international and local banks, and there is of course the element of in-country value, but it doesn't go beyond the risk and reward mechanism we have. And I can see that the local banks now, given these parameters, they're very much equipped to compete with international banks as well.
Thank you very much, Mohsin. Staying on the concept of global banks versus local banks, Stanley, you of course work for a huge global conglomerate, General Electric. How do you balance, or how do you interact with the regional local banks? Do you just have a instruction from the corporate head office, we only deal with our international banks? And what is your exposure with local banks? What do you specifically use them for?
This is a fantastic question. In fact, it brings a lot of introspection in terms of how we manage this. And the way I would look at it is there are two aspects, again, from a treasury standpoint. One is your standard cash management. Now, as GE, our requirements on the cash management front are not very exotic. We are not in the B2C space. We are in the B2B space, dealing with large governments. So we don't require really a large network of branches to be able to manage your collections and so on. So international banks do fairly well in terms of our asks from a cash management standpoint, especially with the fact that as a company, you would always want to have an option to be able to consolidate cash across geographies, have a central liquidity cash pool sort of a mechanism, regionally, globally. That sort of breadth is something which international banks offer. You can't ignore the fact that that's clearly their strength. However, one cannot do business in the region if you do not partner with local banks. And there are specific strengths which one need to partner with local banks for. The risks in the region are far better understood by local banks. International banks, the people in the organization may understand the risks, but as an organization, international banks are pretty slow to move, to adapt towards risks. Like what Mohsin mentioned, there are certain banks which would look at international banks which would not work with Oman specifically because of the liquidity at the country ratings and so on. But local banks are far eager and understand the risk far better than international banks. So again, then there is a cash-mandated situation here. You can't always ride on local banks to only take risk. You've got to manage the asset liability book on their side well as equally. It's as equally important too. So to manage that reward ratio with the local banks is constantly a challenge. But the way we currently balance it is cash management, largely international, the risk side of trade, receivables, what banks need to issue on GE's behalf. All of that we try and partner with local banks. That mix is always challenging, but it is rewarding for both banks of the spectrum.
Absolutely. So you really have to understand the value that a local bank can bring. And especially
True.
Because this is a session for treasurers outside the Middle East that want to get a flavor. And I think that's really key. The difference between, and your international global bank cannot deliver everything that is required within the Middle East, the local banks play a very important role. And I think you pointed that out significantly. Very good. Now, we already touched upon digitalization when we talked about the banking environment. How is the digitalization on the corporate side? Of course, we have and of course, the whole corporate environment within the Middle East is different as well. You have, of course, the large international corporates, you have the government-related entities, and you have the local family groups. Now, you won't have insight in all of those specifically, but how do you see the corporate and digitalization within the corporate treasury having developed, and what is still lacking? Where are they at the moment? Muhsin, could you take that?
Yes, so I would say digitalization for us, when I was back in Oman Shipping, which very much played a role of being a center of excellence within the treasury for the group itself, and that was translated into having a centralized treasury within the group, Asia's group. We were very much early on in adopting to the digital aspect of treasury by implementing the treasury management system, having it centralized, and having the integration with the ERP as well. Before that, of course there was a huge lacking when it comes to digitalization within the organization, not just for treasury but the other aspects as well. So I see now that very much accelerating. And if I can speak, from our group itself, with the new operating model we have and the centralization of treasury with the finance unit as well, we also actually introduced a new technology unit and a chief technology officer, which actually was not there, and it basically gives a holistic view of the entire organizational technological aspect as well, in terms of the centralization of the ERP and the other business versus the back office operational systems as well. So I see that now accelerating, but I look at ourselves as well being fortunate enough that we were in a much better seat before the pandemic and before the acceleration within the region. Treasury, given the fact that it's very much dependent on the banking landscape and dependent on international banking landscape as well as the local as well, it really accelerated the digital aspect much earlier than the other units within the the other organization in general as well.
Okay, Stanley, same question for you on digitalization on the corporate side, but also I would like to throw in COVID-19 and how much has this unfortunate pandemic actually been beneficial for this region? Could you take that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is again two parts to this question. Right? Let me tackle the COVID bit a little later, but just purely from a treasury technology standpoint, look, as a multinational entity, the investment is at the top of the house, right? And you are investing in technology which is scalable, and one of your core intentions is to not ride upon technology which is provided by the banks, because then you will end up having 60 different bank tokens, 60 different websites to handle, and so on and so forth. So you want to create a treasury solution or a TMS which is bank agnostic, and that's what GE is worked through years and decades, in fact. So all of our treasury tools, from the procurement of guarantees, from our payment infrastructure, from our balance reporting side of it, everything is bank agnostic. And that's been investment over a period of time. We were one of the first entities to have a Swift BIC, as a corporate of our own, again, decades before. So our collaboration with each of these participants has been, a series of evolution over a period of time. Now, within the region, however, when I look at other corporates, I still see a lot of corporates relying very heavily, on banks to be able to provide technology which they can use in-house without really spending on that backbone. And I think to a great extent that's a good thing to do, but to build something which does not rely too much on banks, but is interfaces with your own ERP, is a critical uh, investment to be done over a period of time. Now, many corporates, COVID was really a shocker, right? Personally, I never thought a treasury function could ever be done from home. In my mind, I'm the conventional treasurer, right? You need a Bloomberg screen, you need to have a trading desk and all of that. And that can only happen in safe, secure environments of office. COVID shook that up. COVID shook that up, even for a multinational corporate. A lot of things which you thought could not be done could be done. And it's been demonstrated, right? This has been a year plus. I'm working from home pretty successfully. Uh, the need to continuously look at investing in technology, the need to look at COVID as a stepping stone, especially with corporates who are struggling to sell this technology bit internally. The corporates need to look at this as a great opportunity and focus towards the next stage of digitalization in their organizations.
Absolutely, but we're not there yet. For example, checks are still very common in this region. Of course, they will phase out eventually, and for those outside of the region, as shocking it may be, I am aware of one company where by board resolution online banking is prohibited. No, even during COVID, they try to stay away from online banking as much as possible. So I think it's also we're in this phase where we're going towards digitalization, but not everybody's joining the ride yet. But we're definitely on a big trend towards digitalization, right? Efficient, faster, 24/7 treasury as well. Now, for those treasurers and people on the way up the treasury ladder that are outside the Middle East and that would have an interest of actually, or maybe through their company, have exposure to the Middle East, what would be your top tips of what do you need to succeed in the Middle East, and especially maybe a second part to the questions, what would you particularly need to look out for when you start looking at either your a regional group of companies in the Middle East or whether you want to establish a company in the Middle East? Mohsin?
I think on top of course, having the technical knowledge as well, which is no different from other regions as well. One of the key points as well in this region is we value relationship. So it's the relationship versus the transactional way of doing business. I think building a relationship over the years with your key stakeholders, that's quite important to succeed in this region, especially in the treasury spectrum. I would also say change is happening, and with the COVID and the digitalization, this has been accelerated more. And our banks are actually not reluctant for change, but for us, key aspect is to be part of that change and allowing them to be part of that change as well, and not to exclude the local banks from these opportunities and ideas of new change as well. They're very much open, but then they rely on this pool of talent that is available, be it expat or local treasurers within the region, to come up with these ideas as well to them and be making them part of the change. And that definitely comes with the first point I've mentioned, which is the relationship, of course, which is very important. Yeah.
Yes, this region is all about drinking tea, having a shisha, and talking your bank. It's absolutely true. Thanks, Mohsin. Stani, your advice to treasurers for the first time being exposed to the Middle East?
Look, I think I would just put it as a 5-stage approach, right? And going very quickly through them. I think first is need to embrace challenges. Don't look at the ups and downs and the dynamic nature in the region. Don't let that put you off. Look beyond corners and embrace the challenges. That's one. Second is embrace diversity. the need to accept different nationalities, different perspectives, different cultures is pretty critical in this part of the world. The need to also, work with there is an emerging, talent hidden source in terms of women population, and that needs to just be encouraged and taken up to notches far higher than where it is currently. So, need to embrace diversity is critical. The need to partner with banks and not look at banks as suppliers, but work with them, uh, bring to them expertise which you might have seen outside the region so that they can grow, cultivate, again, over tea, over shisha, but, work and partner with them. Uh, the fourth was patience. Need to be patient is key. Things don't happen overnight here. The region absorbs, reacts, and then takes things further. So have that level of patience, and finally, don't forget to cultivate local talent. One cannot be in a cocoon that look, this region can just function with expats, but there is a lot of local talent. The grads coming out in the region, across the region, are fiercely independent, want to grow, want to learn. Focus on them and build and welcome people into this treasury profession.
Thank you, Stanley. And indeed, it is a very exciting region. And I think you summarized it very good. It's the relationship that is key here. I think the cultural aspects are very important, especially if you realize that I think in the UAE, there's something like 90 different nationalities here. So if you have a treasury department, you're probably dealing with a couple of nationalities within your team that you have to deal with as well. You have to know how everybody acts and reacts different. And of course, the diversity is a very big topic in the Middle East as well. We've run almost out of time. So Muhsin, Stanley, I would like to thank you very much for your very useful insights. For everybody listening, thank you very much for your interest in the Middle East. May I like to point out, if you have a keen interest within Treasury in the Middle East, the ACT actually has a Middle East Treasury Summit, virtually, of course, again this year at the end of September. So please look out for that for further insights into the Middle East. Also, I want to say that please stay connected with the ACT on Twitter at ACT Update, on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Our panelists will be around over the next 4 days. So please, if you have a question, please look them up on the portal and send them a private message. But that's all from us here. I wish you a very good rest of the conference, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you.
Thanks.